Emily, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I always love having you on because you work with female athletes. You are with them on a daily basis, working on their performance, a lot of strength training, speed and agility. And yeah, it's so great to talk to you because you see firsthand what this population does struggle with in terms of improving their performance. So today we're going to specifically talk about how to reduce overuse injuries and sort of how to stick with a program where your daughter can get her best results and not burn out or maybe hinder her speed. So, I guess just to kick this off, what are some of the biggest issues you're seeing in the female athlete space with the girls you work with and the parents you talk to on a daily basis? Why are most of them suffering these overuse injuries? And yeah, what's going on there?
Yeah, I think the biggest factor is that youth sport is now it has been professionalized to the point that youth sport occurs year round, and there is a extreme push or pressure on these parents that their athletes must constantly be performing that sport all the time or else they're missing out. And what we find that tends to leads to is that these girls end up playing, if not on two teams of the same sport in a season, but they play two sports competitively that are different sports within the same season. And that turns into, an upwards to 15 to 20 hours a week of sport. And there's just not enough time in the day to do the other things that are going to emphasize athletic development, especially strength training for the young female athlete, how paramount that is for their body. And instead, we have girls that are on, doubling rosters, U14, U16 soccer team within the same season. I don't have time to come in. Or they are a softball athlete and they're playing softballs always year round. And they also pick up, school swimming, and that's 5 days a week. So they just don't have time for it all. And they're unfortunately doing two competitive sports, which just leads to too much work on the athlete, not just physically, but also psychologically. And that's why we see so many injuries occurring, as well as, burnout within the youth sport population itself, because it is just far too much pressure. And it's hard because parents feel as though if they're not, you know, not to say like, bending to the pressure or folding to the pressure, but if they're not making sure that their kid is signed up for that team or going to that tournament, that their kid is going to miss out and lose out on an opportunity. And I think really we need to start having parents learn how to change the perspective that, their job is to help instill healthy habits that are going to help emphasize longevity, because at the end of the day, for most female athletes, after college, then what? And if we taught our girls that they should burn the candle at both ends once they get out of college and they don't have their sport anymore, that's when we start to see some really unfortunate mental health issues start to emerge, because it's such a drastic lifestyle change, versus if we use this time in adolescence to really help build fundamentals of, these are things that are non-negotiables, that you need to lift weights twice a week because your body needs it as a female. It helps you be strong, it helps you be resilient, and it also helps you be confident. And then it helps you be faster and jump higher. And then you have one full rest day a week. Without a full rest day, your body never gets to recover. And that's for your mind and your body. And that, it's okay to say no. It's okay to say, hey, coach, I have my 16U practice tonight. I don't think that I can play at the highest level in your practice literally within the same day. That's 4 hours of the same sport. That is just too much. And it's just having that communication. You're teaching your athlete communication, which is a fundamental life skill that's going to carry into their career as they get older. Versus if you have your athlete learn just to say, like, I have to do it all, I have to do it all, they get burnt out and then they end up pushing back as they get older.
Let's dive into the injury risk discussion a little bit further. So, can you just break down what is happening at the muscular level with girls doing too much sport load as opposed to that lack of strength training?
Yeah. So, sport in itself is extreme high wear and tear. If you look at an athlete, if she's running or jumping, she experiences upwards to like 8 times her body weight in force. So at the physiological level, that means that her muscles have to absorb that force. And often her muscles are not strong enough to absorb those force. So they end up breaking down in order to prepare for the next time it's coming. And then those forces have to go somewhere. So they end up going to their ligaments, tendons, and bones. And over time, continuous wear and tear without rebuilding leads to an injury. So when we continuously do the same sport, unfortunately, the body is really smart at kind of down regulating things. So we used to believe that running will build strong bones. And then we learned that after a mile, the bone turnover actually stops because your body desensitizes to it because you're doing the same movement over and over again. So that rate of turnover actually down regulates. And that's why sprinting is actually so much better, not only for bone development, but also speed development. And if you're looking to strengthen your bones, going for long runs just isn't it. That same down regulation applies to playing your sport. Whether it be, the same movement patterns that you're experiencing in soccer, whatever sport it is that you're playing, the same process is going to occur. That because it's the same thing and there's no actual progressive overload, there's going to be really no adaptation. And in fact, you're just kind of in a cycle of breakdown, hopefully rebuild, breakdown, hopefully rebuild. So what strength training does, strength training introduces a very different stimulus because the type of strength training, when it's well designed, needs to be complementary to what the demands are on the field. So for a soccer player, you're going to make sure that you have not only good bilateral, but also unilateral strength. And we're emphasizing those different patterns during different seasons, and that utilizing a progression of higher volume into lower volume, higher intensity into explosive movement actually trains the muscle to not only be stronger, but to be more explosive. Girls innately have far less type 2 muscle fibers. That means that they're not as explosive, they're not as fast. If you have a boy and a girl race each other, the boy always beats the girl the first couple of yards and then the girl catches up. That is just by design because she innately has far fewer type 2 muscle fibers and her body does not innately know how to recruit those fibers that she has. So going for runs and just sprinting itself is not going to build type 2 muscle fibers. Instead, if we do resistance training, again, well designed, lower volume, higher intensity that progresses over time, she has muscle fibers that actually can turn into type 2. And that just means that they're fast twitch, and that's going to allow her to be more explosive, more powerful. And that also means that she's able to absorb more explosive, powerful movement patterns. So it's like a double-edged sword because not only does it help her perform better in her sport, but it also helps reduce the risk of injury, especially as most injuries are going to occur from the wear tear of that type of movement pattern versus like a moderate intensity, which type 1 muscle fibers are much more equipped to handle. And that's what female athletes innately have. That's why female athletes innately can actually handle higher volumes than boys and why they often have better endurance. They're just physiologically different at that level. And that's why we need to do that type of strength training year round to help drive the development and utilization of type 2 muscle fibers, which is going to help them perform and reduce injury risk and be very complementary to what type of stimulus they're getting on the field.
It's so crazy because a lot of girls and also their parents, they always want these girls to be explosive and develop speed. And when they're scheduling too much or playing on 2 teams in a season, it leaves very little room to actually get a good speed stimulus or at least get the benefit from a speed session because these girls aren't recovered enough. So let's maybe talk about the importance of recovery and just really embracing those off days, making sure they are true off days. I mean, usually with my girls, I say we are definitely not training on Fridays or maybe Sundays or a Monday. And you have to figure out in your schedule like what those off days are going to be.
Yeah, that's such an important concept. I think first to kind of talk about speed training, I think let's talk about the physiological level, what speed training does. Speed training teaches your body how to recruit those type 2 muscles. It does not build type 2 muscles. So if we have an athlete that is only training how to recruit the muscles that she has, she'll only be so fast. So if we again only emphasize speed training over resistance training, you're only training the body how to recruit the muscles that she has versus building type 2 muscles, and then also concurrently teaching her body how to recruit them at the right time. With that said, that recruitment pattern is going to be highly dependent on not only her athlete's level of strength, but also her level of recovery status. Because if an athlete is too fatigued, that recruitment pattern will always be slower and it won't become an innate pattern because she's so fatigued as fast as an athlete that was very well rested. So that was what comes into play of the importance of that full rest day. And a full rest day means like full rest. Your athlete is not lazy. If she is resting, she go for a walk if you really need to do something, but that's about it. Her body physically needs to recover because all type of training is a stress. And my favorite saying is that stress causes fatigue, and fatigue not only helps your body adapt, but it also masks fitness. So if you're too fatigued, your body will never actually be able to turn that fatigue into adaptation and showcase that adaptation into improved fitness. So it's a constant balance of when is the time to introduce fatigue, when is the time to pull back and recover from that fatigue so my body can get better and then showcase that performance as improved fitness. But if you're always fatigued, your athlete will never be performing as well because fatigue masks fitness. So one full rest day is probably one of the easiest ways to do it. Unfortunately, it's so hard for an athlete to actually get that. So that's why I actually like to try to like keep it simple. Like, I don't care when you do this rest day. I don't care, I can tell you the ideal situation, but life is not ideal. Normally a parent has 3 other kids, you're shuttling everybody around. Just pick one day that they do nothing. And it has to be one day a week. Ideally, keep it consistently, but sometimes that just logistically doesn't happen because the coach all of a sudden, like, there's a rain delay. So now there's no game today. The game's actually tomorrow. So then take that day as a rest day. You need to be able to make sure you emphasize the importance of one rest day a week. Be flexible of when that rest day is because being rigid is going to cause you a lot of anxiety, and often that's what's going to just add to even more fatigue. And it's just being able to apply the importance of a rest day into a logistically chaotic parent schedule. So one rest day a week, make sure you're sleeping 8 to 10 hours a night. Anything less than 8 hours increases your injury risk upward to like a third to a half more than compared to an athlete that isn't, which is ridiculous, like 30% greater chance of an injury just by sleeping less than 8 hours. What an easy way to help your body. And that's because sleep is what helps dissipate or fatigue or helps your body recover. That's when the rebuilding process occurs. That's when those muscles that were broken down from all that wear and tear are able to regenerate, recover, and be stronger than they were before. Same with nutrition. If you're only focusing on sleeping and rest day, but there's no fuel in the tank, there's no building blocks, those muscles will never be able to rebuild because they have to pull from other tissues in your body, meaning break down other tissues to help rebuild those tissues. And that just leads to more fatigue. So making sure your body has enough of those fuel sources is paramount to that recovery process.
I do want to touch on what not to do on a rest day. So they shouldn't go for a long distance jog because I think a lot of people think, well, it's a lighter activity. What harm can it cause? But why shouldn't girls do that on their off day? Like
Yes,
go
same
for a
concept.
2 mile run.
So going for a run itself is going to expose your athlete to 3 to 5 times her body weight and force. So that's just more stress. Going for a walk does not. Going for a walk is that low intensity, steady state movement. The whole point is to help get blood pumping, to help move all of those like things that are in the body, metabolites that have broken down, clear them out, help your body recover, feel less sore. That's fantastic. But higher intensity movements means greater load exposed to the body, means more breakdown. So even though you can say a jog is light, from a force standpoint, it's not. Walking is low force. So let's stick to low force activity. Going for a bike ride, going for a swim, All of those are very low impact activity. Low impact just means low force being exposed to the muscles, tendons, bones at those joints. And that's what we want to focus on if you need to do something. But that's a great day to do your homework. That's a great day to do things that are not sport related. I am a big believer in trying to move every day, but sometimes your body just can't. So like going for a walk is just a great, easy way. Get some fresh air, make it a 10-minute walk, and that's what you can do on a rest day. But anything more than that is just not a rest day.
And it also hinders that speed development going for that long, slow jog on those off days because you're going to be more fatigued, but then you're training all your slow twitch muscle fibers, and that definitely
Exactly.
does not help with your speed. So,
Yeah, you literally in
yeah,
a jog taught your body, no, recruit the slow muscles instead. So
right.
you're literally having two very different training. You're teaching your body two very different things, and then you're wondering why you're not getting faster.
Yep. Yeah, if anyone listening, if you want to improve speed, please stop going for those long, slow distance runs. You are better off taking a full recovery day. And I really like your suggestion to also focus on something maybe non sport related. I really like the idea of maybe cooking with your family or learning how to make a balanced meal. I mean, that's going to go a much further way than going for a jog that's only going to catabolize your muscles more and make you a slower and less explosive athlete.
And most like high performing athletes are not athletes that can understand how to pull back. So if you tell this athlete you can go for a jog, it ends up being not even it's not even what you thought it would be. It is something that they've turned competitive, that they're trying to beat their last time. Like it is not many athletes are able to understand when to pull back. So you have to force the pull back by not doing that exercise. A walk, 10 minutes, 30 minutes max. Great. You can't really compete in a walk. That's fantastic. Anything more than that, and I'm exactly big believer, this is a time to build other healthy habits. Maybe this is the time that you read a book. You do something that is going to instill another healthy habit that is going to last you a lifetime because you can't always be in competition mode. The body neurologically needs to downregulate, which also helps you recover.
Let's also touch on what you mentioned there about how girls need to follow a program and stick with it and kind of not add in all these other workouts and jogs and circuits at home. So if they're working with a performance coach or doing some remote program, you can't deviate from that because there's just too many cooks in the kitchen. Your body's going to get confused and you're not going to be able to work toward that goal you want to reach, like speed or maybe better agility or strength and power. So let's talk about why it's so important to stay consistent with the performance program that you're on.
Yeah, I mean, I understand like a lot of parents will be like, well, what can my daughter do outside of here? She found a jump program online. She's doing that on top of the program that she's doing with you guys. And I always like to try to simplify it in that it's like you're trying to bake cookies, but you're following two different recipes at the same time. One batch of cookies, and your cookies are not turning out well. And it's well because you're following two different recipes. You cannot follow two different recipes. You must follow one recipe. You can double that recipe and see what happens, but you cannot do a different recipe because two different recipes will end up not creating delicious cookies. So if you're that concerned that you need your athlete to do more because you feel as though she's not doing enough, you have to go to that initial recipe and say, hey, what can we do to add to this recipe to get me a bigger result, more cookies, a bigger yield? But going somewhere else to a different recipe book is going to lead to really crappy cookies. So you need to focus on having one recipe and sticking to that one recipe and committing to it and then seeing the result and then deciding if you want to try a different cookie, a different recipe. But if you try to hop and add so many different things, it's just not going to result the way that you want it because the body is really it's just like it's just like baking. It's the same thing. You have to tell your body, give it certain ingredients, um certain measurements at certain temperatures, and that's what's going to help your body develop and actually reach that goal. But if you try to do too many things at once, it ends up being too fatigued, and that's when you end up seeing either an injury or poor performance. And you're like, why isn't my speed gone up? I keep doing all these things. I'm running, I'm doing this. And it's like, well, it's because you're following too many different recipes. Follow one recipe. And if you feel the need to do more, go to that cook who wrote that recipe and say, is there anything I can add to this recipe that helps me get this recipe better?
I see that a lot with girls who maybe go for like a 3 mile run before like a high velocity day, and they're wondering why they're like slowing down or their times are worse. And it's because they're fatigued from the day before. And I think it's just like making those expectations clear to everyone. Hey, if you're going to do some nonsense outside of this, then yeah, you can expect your performance in the facility or on the track to completely go down. And you're not going to get those incremental improvements over time.
Exactly. Exactly. We have an athlete, I actually just spoke to her dad, whose vertical jump just isn't, she's a volleyball player, isn't going up. We're like, why? I've been here. I'm like, well, typically when that happens, what's her recovery looking like outside of here? What's her sleep? What's her nutrition? Maybe we should talk about adding a day. And then to find out that she's actually like doing this whole additional other vertical jump program on her own, like all these plyometrics. And
Mhm.
she's doing it when she's like in season. And this last program she was on was like a complete month deload because she really has 1 month a year that we can just like decrease volume, decrease intensity, because we're saying like she's not improving, her body's really fatigued. Let's get it to recover. Then to find out she's doing all this extra jumping, and then her knee is hurting again. And it's like it's the same conversation. It's just you're trying to follow way too many recipes at once. You have to trust the one recipe that you're on, because you can't have a science experiment and be like, oh, the science experiment has not turned out that I wanted to, but it's because you secretly added something else to the mix and you didn't tell the chemist. And they're like, well, why is this green? Like, why this isn't turning out the way I want to? So it's really the same process. Like, it's so this athlete means well because she wants to get better. She absolutely wants to get better. But instead, I wish some of the feedback from the parent was more like, okay, should we go another day a week? Should we ask them if they can write something for us to do at home? We have access to weights at home, or should we focus on like what out? Let's ask them what they recommend, and maybe they'd recommend, hey, this isn't the season to build your vertical. You're in season right now. You have an injury, a severe injury history, so let's make sure you're recovering. What's your sleep like? What's your nutrition like? Because then when we hit winter, then we can really start to drive the needle forward. There's just a season for everything, and you can't do it all at once.
It's so sad, and I've heard those stories so many times, and I just feel like all the athletes who are the least recovered are the ones who get frustrated when a program, like, isn't working, so then they end up being program hoppers, and they start trying all the things that thinking that's what's going to stick and that's what's going to get them results, but what really is gonna get them the results is sticking to one program consistently for, I'd say, a minimum at, like, 2 months, 3 months,
Yeah.
and start there. You don't have to follow like a separate plyometric or vertical jump program. And usually these online plyometric programs, I hate to say it, they're super high volume.
Oh
There's
my
no
gosh.
progression. They're not bouncy or
No.
twitchy,
No.
and it's more endurance training, I'd
It's just to
say.
make them feel tired and sore because
Yeah.
it makes you feel like you did something. And it's
Yeah,
like, but it didn't
exactly.
actually work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, do jumps for 30 to 60 seconds
Yeah.
straight and then
Yeah.
rest 60 seconds. It's like, "Wait a minute, I'm totally slowing down. I'm not
Exactly.
twitchy at all." So, yeah, that's not gonna get you results, and I'll
No.
actually link an episode I did on plyometrics with Carmen Bott talking about this. It's hilarious, but everyone needs to know what true plyometric training is.
Exactly.
Now, coming back to just like the 2 teams in a season, so some of the solutions we talked about is like look at your schedule, have at least 1 off day where you do non-impact recovery or some sort of light movement that isn't jogging. Be over prepared with your nutrition, so making sure you're getting enough calories in, and sometimes with that you have to be very, very prepared and make your meals before the week starts. Otherwise, if you don't have anything ready, then you're going to end up snacking and not having enough or not eating at all. So you have to be prepared with that. And I think you mentioned also if you're concerned about the time to like get to a facility, there's remote options out there as well. Anything else for girls who are double rostering? Should they get off of one of the teams? Or what if they're afraid that they're going to lose playing time? Or there's so many concerns that they
Yeah.
have, which I get, but what would you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because, there's what you would recommend and then what people are actually going to do. So I don't like to give recommendations that actually won't be followed. So I think the biggest thing is that if I have a girl that's playing on two different teams, my biggest thing is that they have to learn how to communicate, that you have to communicate with both coaches and have them understand like what you just did. And also, if something's hurting, some of my favorite coaches are coaches that I've talked to that are like, I didn't even think about they were the school coach. Like, I didn't even think about she's doing club right now. I'm so glad that you brought that up because now I know to ask my girl, like to ask the girl that's coming in, like, are you coming out of club practice? And because then the girl can be like, my knee hurts. And it's like, hey, I'm so glad you still came to practice for the team building. Why don't you help me with this skill, but we're not going to jump or run today. We're going to let your knee kind of rest a little bit because you just did this earlier. That's the sign of a really good coach that cares about your athlete's longevity. If your coach's response is like, well, this practice matters more, that's not a coach that is that's like your best advocate. And then it's like, well, is that the right team? Is that the right mentor you want for your athlete? That's a parent's decision. So with that, I think it's just coming down the communication, helping them understand like, hey, um, I have a severe overuse injury last season. I don't want that this year. I need a strength train twice a week. I know that is going to help me. I might have to leave practice early. Is that okay? I also have practice with my other team tomorrow that I'll be going to. What would you recommend? And if you kind of just have an open conversation with them, the good coaches are the ones that are going to be understanding. But it's what happens is that if there's no communication, most of the time these coaches are the ones that are like, dude, you committed to this team. And understandably why they're getting upset if you're not showing up, but it's because you just haven't communicated. That's like you not going to a work event as an adult, but you didn't communicate with your boss that like you tried your best, but also your kid is really sick. So it just comes down to those communications and teaching them that skill set. And then you also being their best advocate and helping guide them of like, hey, your knee has been hurting. We just ran sprints in your practice yesterday. That is some of the most intense practice I have seen. Let's call your coach. Let's tell him, hey, we're going to come to practice today, but like, is there any way we can avoid these drills? Because our knee has just been aching. We want to perform in the game this weekend. Have that conversation because the coach has no idea what's going on and he's honestly not thinking about it because has 15 others of you that he's just worried about what's the practice, how is he doing it, also he has a family, what time is he coming home, like he has it probably is an actual job outside of this, so there's a lot of factors you have to consider.
I love that. I think that's great. The communication aspect is really key. And I know it's hard for some girls to maybe speak up, but just know that coaches prefer the
Yeah,
transparency and we're not going to judge you. Like we're going to love you for it. And
exactly.
I actually have a girl right now. She's a U16 ECNL soccer player and she's very communicative with her coach, which is incredible. And I love this coach. And I know a lot of coaches like this who are great at tweaking the load based on what's going on. And this girl is playing ECNL right now and also high school soccer because that's just the schedule for fall in Florida. And she let her coach know, hey, I had 3 high school games this week, and I know our club team has a tournament this weekend with 3 more games. That's all these games in 7 days' time.
Yep.
And she was very upfront with him. So I actually went to watch her play at her tournament, and she didn't start because the coach was like, look, we need to cut you back on minutes because you played every single minute of all your high school games this
Yep.
past week. So we're going to cut you back on minutes. And she didn't play a lot of that first game because he recognized she needed to recover and he wasn't going to get a good output from her anyway. And it
Mhm.
wasn't like it was like this important showcase. Even if it was, would you really want to show to college coaches when you're completely gassed from high school
Exactly.
games? There's
Exactly.
another showcase happening in January in Florida where high school cuts back, and you can go all in on that. So I think,
Uh-huh.
like you said, you have to pick and choose your seasons of when it's go time for certain sports or certain teams, and just come back
Exactly.
to, okay, what's my goal with what
Mhm.
I'm doing right now in this season.
100%. I love that.
Now, is there anything else you would just kind of close with as far as overuse?
I mean, I think it's just the song remains the same. You have to strength train. You have to strength train year round. It's so fundamental for the female athlete, and you have to have 1 day off a week. Those are really two non-negotiables if when it comes down to helping reduce the chance of injury.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Emily. I will include all your social media and links in the caption below so everyone can follow up with you. Emily's doing such great work with female athletes in Pennsylvania, so be sure to check her out. I'll also link our past episodes on the menstrual cycle, periodization, and so many other things we've discussed. So, Emily, thank you again, and I'll see everyone next time.